A young billionaire walked into a bakery in the morning when a poor little girl approached him and whispered, "Mister, I'll trade my shoes for a piece of cake." He looked at her feet and, upon seeing the same birthmark as his missing daughter, he broke down in tears, unable to speak. Jack Cooper woke up to the sound of his alarm. 6 in the morning. Another day just like the others. He sat on the edge of the bed and ran his hands over his face. 3 years since Callie had disappeared, and still, each morning brought the same weight. He got up and opened the curtains. The sky was grey, promising a cold morning. Perfect. It matched his mood. The house he lived in had turned into a kind of hideout. After Callie went missing, Jack pulled away from everything and everyone. He quit his job at the architecture firm, cut off contact with friends, and even avoided his neighbors. People didn't understand his pain, and he was tired of hearing cliches about time and healing. 3 years, and the pain was still there, as fresh as it was on the first day. The day Callie disappeared. On the coffee table, the picture frame with Callie's photo was turned face down. Jack always put it that way before going to sleep. In the morning, he would set it upright again, like a ritual. He picked up the frame and looked at the image of his daughter. Bright blue eyes, brown hair, a smile showing her tiny teeth. 3 years old. That was her age when she vanished. Jack placed the picture frame back where it belonged and headed to the kitchen. Coffee. He needed coffee. The coffee grounds were already in the filter from the night before. He pressed the button on the coffee maker and waited, leaning against the counter. "Enough," he said aloud to the empty room. "I'm not staying home today." The decision was sudden. In recent months, he rarely left the house except for essential errands. But today, the air felt too heavy, the walls too close. He dressed quickly, grabbed his keys, and left. The cold hit him like a slap. Jack pulled his coat tighter and walked toward the car. He had no destination in mind. He just needed to move. He drove a few blocks, the city around him slowly waking up. He realized he was hungry. For days, he'd been eating poorly. Coffee, quick sandwiches, anything that required little effort. He stopped at a bakery he had never noticed before. Maybe it was new to the neighborhood, or maybe he had simply never paid attention. "Bread and Company," said the sign above the bakery. Jack parked and went inside. A small bell rang to announce his arrival. The place was small, cozy, smelling of fresh bread, a few wooden tables, a long counter with glass displays full of pastries and bread. "Good morning, what can I get for you?" asked the clerk, a gray-haired woman with her hair in a bun. "Black coffee, large, and a cheese bread." Jack sat near the window. The coffee arrived steaming hot. He took a sip, feeling the warmth slide down his throat. Outside, the city was beginning its daily rhythm. People in a hurry, cars in motion, normal life. A life that seemed to run parallel to his own. The bakery door opened. Jack wouldn't have looked if not for the sound of a child's voice, high-pitched and excited. He turned automatically. It was a reflex he'd developed over the past 3 years. Every time he heard a child's voice, he had to look, always with that flicker of hope, quickly followed by disappointment. A little girl walked in alone. Jack watched, surprised. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Far too small to be roaming around without an adult. She was visibly dirty, brown hair tangled, smudges of dirt on her face, clothes too big for her small frame. Her shoes, old and worn, looked like they were about to fall apart. The child entered timidly, looking around with a mix of curiosity and caution. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the pastry displays. She approached them as if she were seeing a treasure, pressing her dirty little hands against the glass. The clerk, who had just finished serving another customer, noticed the girl and frowned. Children on their own usually meant trouble. She approached, maintaining a professional smile. "Can I help you, sweetie?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. Jack observed the scene while pretending to be focused on his coffee. The girl bit her lip, as if weighing her options. "I'm just looking," she said, backing away from the display a little, as though afraid of being kicked out. "Where's your mother?" the clerk insisted. "She's waiting outside," the child lied, without much conviction. The clerk looked toward the door, then back at the girl. It was obvious she was lying. Jack felt a pang of concern. Who would let such a young child wander alone in the city? The girl started walking around the bakery, looking at the other customers. Her gaze lingered on their plates and cups, watching what each person was eating. Jack realized the child was hungry. Then, to his surprise, she began walking toward him. She wasn't looking at him exactly, but at the cheese bread on the plate in front of him. She stopped about 3 feet away and just stared. Jack felt something stir inside him. A mix of compassion and curiosity. Why this girl, out of all the people in the bakery, had chosen to approach him. "Hi," Jack said, breaking the silence. The girl started slightly, as if caught doing something wrong. She looked right at him, and Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Her eyes were an intense blue, almost unreal, a blue he knew well. "Hi," she whispered back. "Are you hungry?" Jack asked, nodding toward the cheese bread he hadn't touched yet. The girl didn't answer right away. She seemed to be deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she took a few more steps closer. "Mister," she said in a low tone, almost a whisper, "I'll trade my shoes for a piece of cake." Jack blinked, confused. "What?" The girl pointed to her own feet, then to the display. "My shoes for that chocolate cake, the one with the blue frosting." There was something so serious in the way she spoke, as if she were proposing a perfectly normal trade. Jack felt a pang in his chest. It was such a desperate and yet innocent proposition. "You don't have to give up your shoes," Jack said, feeling a lump in his throat. "I can buy a cake for you." The girl's face lit up instantly. For a moment, Jack saw what must have been her natural expression, free of suspicion or worry. It was a radiant smile, full of small teeth. "Really?" she asked, as if she couldn't believe it. Jack signaled to the clerk, who was watching the interaction with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Please, bring that chocolate cake with the blue frosting for the girl." The clerk hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and went to get the order. The girl remained standing, swaying on her worn-out shoes, as if she didn't quite know what to do. "Would you like to sit?" Jack offered, indicating the chair across from him. She nodded quickly and climbed onto the chair, sitting on the edge as if ready to run at any moment. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Lena," she answered, eyes still fixed on the display, waiting for her cake. "And yours?" "Jack." "Jack," she repeated, as if testing out the sound. "Thanks for the cake, Jack." The clerk brought the slice. It was a generous piece of chocolate cake with a bright blue frosting. Lena's eyes grew wide, as though she'd never seen anything so wonderful in her life. "Go ahead," Jack said, nudging the plate toward her. Lena needed no further encouragement. She picked up the fork and sliced off a piece, bringing it to her mouth reverently. She closed her eyes as she tasted it, savoring every particle of sweetness. "Is it good?" Jack asked, smiling at the expression of pure delight on the girl's face. She only nodded, already cutting another piece. She ate slowly, relishing each bite as if it might be her last. Jack watched her, feeling a strange familiarity in the scene. The way she slightly tilted her head as she chewed, the movement of her tiny hands holding the fork. Something about it stirred his memories. That was when he noticed. As she ate, Lena swung her legs. The motion caused her oversized dress to ride up a bit. On her left ankle, there was a mark, a crescent-shaped birthmark. The air caught in Jack's lungs. His heart seemed to stop for a second. The mark was identical, exactly identical to Callie's. Same shape, same size, same place. Jack felt his eyes burn. A tear slipped out, then another. He couldn't hold back the silent sob that shook his shoulders. It was Callie's birthmark. It had to be. "Are you crying?" asked Lena, leaning over to see his face better. Jack tried to hide it, but it was too late. The tears were now flowing freely. "I'm sorry," he said, grabbing a napkin. "Ooh. It's just, that mark reminded me of something." Lena glanced at her own ankle curiously. It's my birthmark. Mommy says it's special, that it looks like a crescent moon in the sky." She smiled proudly. "Only I have a mark like this." Jack swallowed hard, trying to control the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Callie's voice echoed in his memory. "Daddy, look at my moon mark, it's special." It was exactly what he used to tell her when she was little. "What is that on your ankle?" Jack asked, his voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. Lena looked down at her ankle again. It's my birthmark. Mommy says it looks like a moon." Jack swallowed. His hand shook as he lifted the cup to his lips. The coffee was cold now, but he barely noticed. "Do you live near here?" he asked, trying to regain his composure. "Sort of," Lena answered, focused on her cake, apparently unaware of the impact her words and presence were having on Jack. Jack studied the child more carefully. The shape of her face, the tilt of her head when she spoke, the gesture of tucking her hair behind her ear. Everything seemed so familiar, and those blue eyes. Nobody else had eyes exactly that shade, except he needed to keep it together. He'd been through this before. For 3 years, he'd seen his daughter in every child he came across. The pain of disappointment when he realized his mistake always made things worse. "Is the cake tasty?" he asked, trying to sound normal, though his voice still shook slightly. "It's the best cake in the world," Lena replied, licking the blue frosting from her fingers. There was a blue smudge at the corner of her mouth, and she didn't seem to care. Jack wanted to ask more. Who was this mommy she mentioned? Where did she live? Why was she alone? But he was afraid of scaring her off, afraid she would run away and he'd never see her again. Lena finished eating with obvious pleasure, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and smiled at Jack. A smile that seemed to light up the entire bakery. "I have to go now. Mommy's waiting. Your mother is here." Jack looked around, his heart pounding. Maybe he could meet this woman, talk to her, find out. "No, she's at home," Lena said, hopping down from the chair. "Thanks for the cake, Jack." "Wait," Jack nearly stood up. "Are you alone? Want me to walk you home?" Lena smiled in mom, as though amused by his concern. "I always walk alone. I know the way." Before Jack could say anything else, she waved and ran to the door. The little bell rang as she left, happily skipping along the sidewalk as if she'd just received the best gift in the world. Jack watched through the window as she walked away. He saw her turn to look at him one last time, waving, before turning the corner and disappearing from sight. The image of the mark on her ankle was burned into his mind. Was he going insane? Or was it possible that... The memory struck him like a punch to the gut. The day Callie disappeared, 3 years ago, it was a Sunday. Jack was at home, working on an urgent project. Diane, the babysitter, had taken Callie to play at Riverside Park, just 2 blocks away. It was a safe, familiar place they went almost every weekend. Callie loved that park. "I'll be back in an hour," Diane had said before leaving with the little girl, who was carrying Rosie, her inseparable rag doll, and wearing a new denim overall. Jack barely noticed the time passing, immersed in his work. It was only when the phone rang that he realized more than 2 hours had gone by. "Jack?" Diane's voice trembled. I can't find Callie." The world seemed to slow down. "What do you mean? You can't find her?" "She was in the sandbox, playing with other kids. I was sitting on a nearby bench. I swear it was only a minute. When I looked again, she was gone." Panic was immediate. Searches, shouts, the police. Then came days of investigation, weeks of anguish, months of fruitless searching. All they found was Rosie, the doll, lying on a path leading out of the park. Jack kept Rosie in a box in his room. Sometimes, when the pain became unbearable, he'd open the box just to feel the lingering scent still clinging to the fabric. The noise of the bakery brought him back to the present. The coffee in his cup was cold. Jack stared at it for a moment, realizing something had changed inside him. The birthmark, those blue eyes, the way she tilted her head when she spoke. And now walking alone on the street, a little girl alone in the city. Where was she going? Who was she living with? Jack left money on the table and headed out to the street. He looked in both directions, but Lena was already gone. The cold didn't feel so harsh anymore. He needed to find her again. He had to find out more. Above all, he had to control the dangerous hope that began to grow in his chest. For the first time in 3 years, Jack felt something other than emptiness. It was a strange sensation, almost forgotten, a mix of restlessness and purpose. Jack looked up at the grey sky. The clouds seemed a little less heavy now, and a ray of sunshine tried to break through. A new day was just beginning. Since meeting Lena in the bakery, Jack's life had changed. It wasn't a change that could be seen from the outside. His house was the same. His face still bore the signs of 3 years of exhaustion and pain. The change was within him, like a small ember refusing to go out. The morning after their encounter, Jack woke up early. He'd slept poorly, tormented by dreams in which he saw Callie running through a maze of streets, always one step ahead of him. He drank his coffee, got dressed, and headed to the bakery. He didn't know if Lena would come back, but he had to try. He arrived at 7:30 in the morning and sat at the same table as the day before. He ordered coffee and watched the door, waiting for the little bell to ring and announce the arrival of the blue-eyed girl, but she didn't appear. He stayed there until 10, downing cup after cup of coffee, flipping through a newspaper he wasn't really reading. No sign of Lena. He decided to try again the next day. The next morning, he repeated the routine. And the day after that. And the next. After 5 days, the clerk already looked at him with familiarity and a touch of pity. On the 6th day, she approached his table. "Are you waiting for someone, sir?" Jack hesitated. "A little girl. She was here almost a week ago. Brown hair, blue eyes." The clerk frowned. "Oh, that dirty child you bought a cake for. I haven't seen her since then." Jack nodded, disappointed. "If she shows up again, could you let me know? My name is Jack Cooper." He wrote his phone number on a napkin. "It's important." The woman took the napkin with a wary expression. "She's my niece," Jack lied, feeling guilty. "We're worried. She ran away from home." The lie seemed to work. The clerk's expression softened. "Of course, Mr. Cooper. If she shows up, I'll call." Jack thanked her and left. He sat in his car for a long time, staring at nothing. Perhaps he was going crazy. Maybe he'd imagined the resemblance, the birthmark. Maybe it was just his desperation creating connections where none existed, but he couldn't get Lena out of his mind. The way she spoke, how she tilted her head slightly when she smiled, and that mark identical to Callie's. The following day, instead of just waiting at the bakery, he decided to walk around the neighborhood. Maybe the girl lived nearby. He roamed the nearby streets, watching every child who passed by. He entered markets, swag stores, asked at local schools if they knew a girl named Lena. Nothing. After a week of fruitless searching, Jack decided he needed professional help. He phoned Leonard Walters, a private investigator who had helped him in the search for Callie years before. They met at Walters' office, a small disorganized space that exuded competence. The investigator, a man in his 50s with graying hair and piercing eyes, listened attentively as Jack described his encounter with Lena. "Jack," he said when the other man finished, "I understand how you feel, but I have to be honest. You're grabbing onto any hope. I saw the birthmark, Leo, identical to Callie's." Walters sighed. "Birthmarks aren't that rare. And after 3 years, and you know how hard it is. If she was taken by someone, if she's now with another family." "I'm not asking for your opinion," Jack interrupted, harsher than he intended. "I want you to find her. That's all." The investigator nodded, unoffended. He knew the pain this man carried. "I'll need a detailed description. Approximate age, physical features, clothes she wore, anything you remember." Jack provided every detail he could recall. Lena seemed 6 or 7 years old, which matched the age Callie would be now. Brown hair, intensely blue eyes. She was wearing an oversized dress, probably second-hand. Her shoes were old and worn out. She was dirty, like she'd been playing in the dirt. And the birthmark. On her left ankle, shaped like a crescent moon, about half an inch long. Walters wrote everything down, promising to start the investigation immediately. He asked for an advance payment, which Jack handed over without hesitation. Money wasn't a problem, it never had been. "I'll check the local schools, shelters, social services. If she's registered anywhere, I'll find her." Jack thanked him and left the office with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Part of him wanted to believe he would finally find Callie. Another part feared discovering he was just chasing ghosts. The next few days were torture. Jack kept going to the bakery every morning, waiting for hours, with no results. Walters called daily with updates on his search, but there was nothing concrete. No girl matching that description in nearby schools, no records in social services. After 10 days of searching, the investigator suggested widening their area. Maybe the girl didn't live in the neighborhood. Maybe she was just passing through that day. "I'll need more resources," Walters said, "and more time." Jack agreed without hesitation, but frustration was building inside him. The small ember of hope threatened to die again. On the 13th day after his encounter with Lena, Jack decided to change his routine. Instead of going to the bakery, he went to Riverside Park, the place where Callie had disappeared. He hadn't been there since that tragic day. It was like a wound he avoided touching. The park hadn't changed much. The same playground, the same benches, the same trees, now taller. Jack sat on a bench away from the crowds, watching children play. A dull ache pulsed in his chest. He should have spent more time with Callie. He should have cherished every moment, and then he saw her. Across the park, sitting alone on the grass, was Lena. She wore a different dress but equally oversized. Her hair looked like it had been combed, but it was still messy. She was drawing on the ground with a stick, completely absorbed. Jack felt his heart race. For a moment he was paralyzed, afraid she would vanish if he blinked. He took a deep breath and stood, walking slowly toward her, afraid to scare her off. When he was just a few steps away, Lena lifted her gaze. Those blue eyes, so familiar, so painfully similar to Callie's, lit up with a smile. "Hi, Jack." She remembered his name. Something inside him warmed. "Hi, Lena," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "What a coincidence, seeing you here." She shrugged, as if running into acquaintances in random places was the most normal thing in the world. "You disappeared," he said, sitting on the grass a short distance from her, mindful not to crowd her. "I went back to the bakery for days." "We don't go there much," Lena explained, going back to scribbling on the ground with her stick. "Aunt Marla says we can't waste money on silly things." Jack looked at what she was drawing. It seemed to be a house and with a smiling sun and 3 stick figures in front. "Is that your house?" he asked. Lena nodded. "That's me," she said, pointing to the smallest figure. "That's Aunt Marla and that's Uncle Walt. They're your family." The girl was silent for a moment, as though considering the question. "Sort of. They take care of me." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but feared scaring her or coming across as suspicious. "Do you come to this park often?" he tried, and keeping his tone casual. "When it's sunny, yeah." She tilted her face toward the sky, squinting at the light. "Aunt Marla works over there." She pointed to a building across the street. "Sometimes, when she's busy, I stay here until she's done. All by yourself." Jack couldn't hide his concern. Lena shrugged. "I'm used to it." "And she always looks out that window." She pointed at one of the building's windows. "I know how to take care of myself." There was a forced independence in this child that broke Jack's heart. What kind of life did she have? Who exactly were these aunt and uncle she spoke of? "And do you like living with Aunt Marla and Uncle Walt?" he asked, trying not to sound invasive. Lena seemed to think about it. "They're nice to me. Aunt Marla makes sure I bathe every day and combs my hair. Uncle Walt tells me stories before bed." She paused. "But sometimes we don't have food. Daddy, Uncle Walt, is unemployed." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Daddy?" "That's what Uncle Walt asked me to call him," Lena explained, not lifting her eyes from her drawing. "He said every kid needs a dad and a mom." A knot formed in Jack's throat. The idea of someone else being called Dad by his daughter, if she really was his daughter, stabbed him with pain. "Do you remember anything before living with them?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. Lena stopped drawing and looked at him with a confused expression. "What do you mean?" Jack swallowed. "Have you always lived with them since you were a baby?" Lena frowned, as though trying to recall. "I don't know," she finally replied. "But Aunt Marla says she found me when I was really little." Jack's heart hammered. "She found you? Where?" The girl shrugged again. "I don't know." "I never asked." Jack took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He couldn't overwhelm Lena with too many questions at once. "You like to draw," he commented, changing the subject. Her face lit up. "I do. My teacher says I'm good at it. Look." She proudly showed him the drawing of the house and the family. Jack smiled, genuinely touched. "It's very good." They fell silent for a moment, Lena absorbed in her drawing, Jack watching her with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you have any toys?" he asked, remembering Rosie, the rag doll he had kept all those years. Her smile faded slightly. "Not many. Uncle Walt made me a hobby horse, and we have an old ball. And dolls." She shook her head. "No. Aunt Marla said she'll buy me one for my birthday if we have money." Her eyes sparkled hopefully. "I want a rag doll, one with a little dress and yarn hair." Jack's heart nearly stopped. That was exactly how Rosie looked. "Have you ever had a doll like that before?" he asked, voice trembling. Lena paused her drawing and gazed off into the distance, as though trying to pull a memory from a foggy place. "I think I did," she said at last. "Sometimes I dream about a doll with a red dress." Rosie wore a red dress. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the surge of emotion. When he opened them, he saw Lena watching him curiously. "Are you sad again?" He tried to smile. No, I'm okay. I just remembered something." Lena nodded, as though she perfectly understood, and went back to her drawing. Jack watched her in silence, noting every tiny gesture, every expression. He was more convinced than ever that this was Callie, his daughter. But how to approach her? How to tell her the truth without scaring her or causing problems with the people who had cared for her these last 3 years? And what if he was wrong? What if it was just a cruel coincidence, a girl who looked like his lost daughter? "Lena," he said finally, carefully, "do you think you could take me to meet Aunt Marla and Uncle Walt? I'd like to talk to them." The girl looked surprised. "Why?" Jack thought quickly. "Well, you said your dad's unemployed. I know people who might help him find a job." It wasn't exactly a lie. If Walt really needed work, Jack could help. But his main purpose was to meet the people who had been raising, possibly even kidnapped, his daughter. Lena considered the offer for a moment, then smiled. "Aunt Marla will be happy. She always says we need a miracle." "Do you know where she works?" Jack asked, looking at the building Lena had pointed to before. "Yeah, she cleans offices. She'll be done soon." Lena looked at the sun. "She always comes to get me when the sun's right there." Jack nodded, a mixture of anxiety and hope swirling inside him. He would finally meet the people who had been with his daughter for 3 years. If Lena was really Callie. "I can walk you to our house tomorrow," Lena offered. "It's a bit far, but I know the way." Jack hesitated. He didn't want to wait until the next day. He was afraid the girl would disappear again. On the other hand, maybe it was better to talk to Walters first, to prepare more thoroughly. "That would be great," he said at last. "We can meet right here, on this bench, tomorrow morning?" Lena nodded, smiling. "Okay. Uncle Walt will be home too." "He's always at home." Jack smiled, trying to hide the storm of emotions raging inside him. The missing doll, Rosie, which he still had, untouched, made him sink into a deep silence. How would he tell this child he believed he was her real father? How could he explain 3 years of separation? How would he deal with the people who had raised her all this time? "I have to go," Lena said suddenly, standing up. "Aunt Marla's coming." Jack looked toward the building and saw a woman stepping out of the main door. She was the same woman from the bakery, thin, tired-looking, but dressed neatly. "See you tomorrow, then," he said, also getting to his feet. Lena waved and ran toward the woman. Jack watched as she left, his heart heavy with hope and fear. The girl looked back one last time and waved before taking Marla's hand. "Tomorrow," Jack thought. "Tomorrow might be the day I finally get answers, or the day I lose hope forever." Jack woke up before his alarm. He'd slept poorly, tossing and turning for hours, thinking about the meeting with Lena. Today, he would meet the people who had been raising the girl for the past 3 years. He had to keep it together, go slowly. He couldn't just show up accusing them of taking his daughter. He got up and dressed carefully. He wanted to make a good impression. He chose simple but good quality clothes, dark jeans, a blue shirt, polished shoes. He didn't want to show off, but he also didn't want to appear sloppy. On his way to the park, he stopped at the same bakery where he had first met Lena. He was already a familiar face there. The clerk smiled when she saw him. "Good morning, Mr. Cooper." "Good morning. I'd like to take a cake." "Chocolate with blue frosting, if you have it." The woman's eyes showed recognition. It was the same cake he'd bought for Lena. She nodded and retrieved it from the display. "Did you find your niece?" she asked while she packed the cake. Jack hesitated for a moment. "Yes." "Thank you for asking." He paid for the cake and headed for the park, placing the box carefully on the passenger seat. The day was bright, though cold. Jack parked and walked to the same bench where he had talked to Lena the day before. He sat with the cake on his lap and waited. At 9:30, he saw Lena approaching along the stone path. She was running, hair flying in the wind. When she saw Jack, she broke into a big smile and waved. She was wearing a different dress this time, one slightly less worn, but still too big for her frame. "Hi, Jack," she said, stopping in front of him, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late. Uncle Walt took forever to wake up." "No problem," he said with a smile. "I brought something for you." Lena's blue eyes lit up at the sight of the bakery box. "Is that a cake?" Jack nodded and handed her the box. She opened it carefully, as if it were a treasure. When she saw the chocolate cake with blue frosting, she let out a gasp of joy. "Just like last time, thank you, Jack. I thought you could share it with your family," he said. Lena gently closed the box. "I'll save it for after lunch. Aunt Marla says sweets before meals ruin your appetite." Jack smiled. This Aunt Marla seemed to care for the girl, despite everything. "Shall we?" he asked. "I'm eager to see your home." Lena nodded and started walking, holding the cake box tightly. Jack followed, trying to control his nerves. He was following a child he believed to be his missing daughter, heading to the home of people who might have kidnapped her. Or maybe not. Maybe they were good people who had found a lost child and cared for her all these years. He didn't know what to expect. They walked for about 20 minutes, moving away from the central neighborhood. The streets gradually became more run down, the buildings older and in poorer condition. They entered a clearly poorer area, with small businesses sporting worn facades and simple houses. "It's right there," Lena said, pointing to a small apartment complex. It was a 3-story building with peeling paint, but it looked clean. The tiny front yard, though small, had well-tended flowers. Lena led Jack up a side staircase to the 3rd floor. She stopped in front of a green door with the number 302 painted by hand. "We're here," she announced, opening the door without knocking. "Aunt Marla, I brought a visitor." Jack took a deep breath and stepped into the apartment. It was small but clean and organized. The living room and kitchen shared the same space. Simple furniture, some clearly second-hand, but everything in order. On the walls, a few children's drawings taped up, probably Lena's work. A woman emerged from another room. It was the same woman Jack had seen at the bakery and the park. Thin, tired, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore an apron stained from cleaning supplies and appeared surprised to see a stranger in her home. "Hello," she said, wiping her hands on the apron, visibly nervous. "Lena, who is this man?" "It's Jack," the girl answered cheerfully, placing the cake on the table. "He bought me cake at the bakery, remember? And he found me in the park yesterday. He said he can help Uncle Walt get a job." Marla gave Jack a suspicious look, which he met with a polite smile. "Jack Cooper," he introduced himself. "Forgive the intrusion, but I met Lena by chance, and she told me about your family's situation." Marla shook his hand briefly. "Marla Winters. This is our home." Then, turning to Lena, "Sweetie, go get Uncle Walt. He's in the bedroom." The girl dashed off to the other room. Jack and Marla were left alone in the living area, an awkward silence between them. "I want to be clear," Marla began, her voice firm despite her nerves. "We don't accept charity. If you're here out of pity, you can leave." Jack shook his head. "This isn't charity. I really can help with employment. I have some connections." Before Marla could respond, Lena returned, pulling along a tall, thin man. He looked about 40, with grey strands in his hair and stubble on his face. He looked tired, with deep circles under his eyes, but there was kindness in his gaze. "Uncle Walt, this is Jack," Lena exclaimed. The man looked at Jack suspiciously, then at Marla, as if asking for an explanation. "This is Walter Winters, my husband," Marla said. "Walt, this is Jack Cooper. Apparently he met Lena at the bakery." The two men shook hands firmly. Jack felt Walter's calloused palms, hands that had clearly known hard work. "Lena said you're looking for a job," Jack commented. Walter grimaced. "I've been looking for months. I worked in construction, but the last site shut down. We're getting by on Marla's salary from cleaning." Marla seemed uneasy about the conversation. "Why don't we sit down?" "I'll make some coffee." Jack accepted the invitation and sat on the worn-out sofa. Lena sat beside him, excited about the visitor. Walter leaned against the wall, observing the stranger warily. While Marla prepared coffee, Jack glanced around, taking in details of the home and the family. There were photos on the wall, few but carefully placed. In one knee, Marla was holding a younger Lena, perhaps around 4, apparently at a birthday celebration with a small cake in front of them. "Lena said she's been with you for quite a while," Jack commented casually. Walter and Marla exchanged a quick look. Tension filled the air. "Yes," Marla finally answered, bringing the coffee. "Almost 3 years." Jack's heart sped up. That timing exactly matched Callie's disappearance. "How did she come to live with you?" he asked, trying not to sound too eager. Another silent exchange between the couple. Marla set the coffee cups down and took a deep breath. "I found Lena alone in an abandoned subway station," she said. "The South Line, decommissioned years ago. I was cleaning there. Sometimes they schedule inspections. She was hiding in a corner, scared, dirty, hungry." Jack felt a knot in his stomach, imagining Callie, if this was truly her, lost, alone, only 3 years old. "Did she tell you her name?" he asked. Marla shook her head. "She barely spoke. She was so little. I asked her name over and over, but all she said was that she wanted to go home, that she wanted her daddy." "We thought about going to the police," Walter added quietly, as if confessing something shameful. "But we were scared. We were poor, didn't have all our papers in order. We were afraid they'd think we had kidnapped her. Or worse, they'd take her to a shelter," Marla said. "You have no idea what those places can be like, Mr. Cooper." "So you decided to raise her," Jack concluded, trying to keep his voice neutral. "We gave her a name," Marla said. "Lena." It was Walter's mother's name. Jack felt as if he'd been punched. They never contacted any official help. While he'd been turning the city upside down looking for Callie, appearing on TV, handing out flyers, offering rewards, his daughter had been just miles away, with a new name and a new family. "You never saw any missing child ads?" he asked, fighting to keep his tone calm. Marla looked away. "At first, we checked the newspapers, but the missing kids shown never looked exactly like her, and after a while, she was already our daughter," Walter finished. "I know it wasn't right, Mr. Cooper, but we're simple people. We always wanted a child. When Lena came into our lives, it felt like a gift from fate." Lena, who was playing with a small cloth ball on the floor, seemed oblivious to the tension in the room. Jack watched her, noting how at ease she appeared, at home. These people had cared for her lovingly for 3 years. They had given her a home, a name, a family. "I understand," Jack said, trying to process everything. "And you never saw any ad about a missing girl?" Marla frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "We saw some, yes, but none that looked exactly like her. And, to be honest, after a while we stopped looking. She was our daughter now." "I know it wasn't right," Walter admitted. "We could have searched more, but we're simple folk, Mr. Cooper. We always wanted a daughter. When Lena showed up, it felt like a miracle." Jack nodded, understanding more than they realized. What was he supposed to do now? Reveal that he believed he was Lena's biological father? Call the police? Or just walk away and leave the girl with the family that had loved and cared for her? He looked at Lena, who was now kicking a small makeshift ball around, seemingly unconcerned with the tension in the room. He couldn't just take her from them. He couldn't traumatize her again, but he couldn't walk away either. Not now that he'd found her. "About the job," Jack said, deciding to hold back for now. "I know some people in construction. I can make some calls if you're interested." Walter looked surprised. "Of course I'm interested. Any honest work would help right now. Jack pulled a card with his number from his pocket. Call me tomorrow. I'll see what I can do. Marla eyed the card suspiciously. Why are you helping us? You barely know us. Jack looked at Lena again. Let's just say, I know how important it is to have a happy family. He stood, preparing to leave. He needed time to think, to plan his next step. Confronting them now, without solid proof, could be disastrous. Thanks for the coffee, he said. And Lena, thank you for showing me your home. The girl smiled. Are you coming back? Jack's heart constricted. If your aunt and uncle let me... Yes. Walter and Marla exchanged glances. After a moment, Walter extended his hand. You'll be welcome, especially if you have news about a job. Jack said goodbye and left the apartment with his mind spinning. As he descended the stairs, he tried to organize his thoughts. These people had taken good care of Lena. They didn't seem like kidnappers or criminals, just a simple couple who found an abandoned child and decided to raise her as their own. But that didn't change the fact that Lena, with her identical birthmark, her blue eyes, her familiar gestures, was very likely Callie. His daughter. Getting into his car, Jack made a decision. He would find concrete evidence. A DNA test would confirm everything, and then, gently, he would find a way to reveal the truth to Lena and to the couple who had raised her, without destroying what they'd built together over the past 3 years, because, above all, Jack wanted his daughter's happiness. Even if that meant sharing her with Walter and Marla Winters, Jack drove slowly through the city. Meeting Marla and Walter had shaken him to the core. If they were telling the truth, and his instincts said they weren't kidnappers or criminals, just simple people who found a lost little girl and, out of fear or opportunity, chose to raise her as their own. The sun was setting by the time he got home. He went in and tossed his keys onto the table. The house felt different now, less empty, somehow, as if hope had taken shape and filled the vacant spaces. He headed straight for the bedroom. He opened the closet and pushed some clothes aside. In the back, there was a dark wooden box with hand-carved details. Jack had bought it shortly after Callie disappeared, specifically to store her memories. He carefully took out the box and placed it on the bed. He sat there for a few moments, just looking at the closed lid. Inside were his most painful and precious memories. He drew a deep breath and lifted the lid. The first item was a photo. Callie on her 3rd birthday, a few months before she disappeared. She wore a yellow dress and was blowing out the candles on a small cake. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement. Jack traced the outline of her face with his finger, the same shape as Lena's eyes, the same smile. He pulled out more pictures. Callie as a newborn, in her mother's arms at the hospital. Callie at 1-year-old, taking her first steps. Callie at the beach, building a sandcastle. In each image, he searched for resemblances to Lena, her facial features, her expressions, her smile. Next, he took out her birth certificate. Callie Ann Cooper, born May 12th. He did a quick calculation. If Lena was Callie, she'd now be 6 years old, going on 7. That matched the girl's apparent age. Then he pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a lock of hair, Callie's first haircut when she turned 1. Light brown, almost blonde. Lena's hair was darker now, but it was common for kids' hair to darken over time. Finally, at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a cotton cloth, was Rosie, the rag doll Callie had carried everywhere. The only thing found on the day of her disappearance. Jack held it carefully, as if it were fragile and precious. It was a simple doll, handmade. Yarn hair dyed red, a red dress with white polka dots, button eyes. Years earlier, Helen, Callie's mother, had sewn it for her daughter during pregnancy. After Helen died in childbirth, the doll became a special bond between mother and daughter. Rosie had been discovered on a side path in the park, away from the playground, as if dropped during a struggle or while running. It was the first clue that Callie hadn't just wandered off. Someone had taken her. Jack ran his fingers over the doll's worn fabric. After 3 years, Callie's scent was gone, but the memories remained. He recalled how she hugged Rosie at bedtime, how she whispered secrets to the doll that even he couldn't hear. Lena had mentioned dreaming about a doll in a red dress. Could it be that, even after all this time, the memory of Rosie lingered somewhere in her mind? He placed the doll next to the most recent photo of Callie and compared the details. Callie's eyes had the same intense blue as Lena's, the shape of her face, the high cheekbones, the small turned-up nose, everything matched. And, of course, the crescent birthmark on her left ankle. But was that enough to be absolutely sure? Could he be seeing only what he wanted to see, creating connections that didn't really exist? Jack grabbed his phone and opened the folder of photos. He had secretly taken a few pictures of Lena at the park while she was drawing on the ground. It hadn't been easy. He didn't want to scare her or look suspicious. He zoomed in on one of the images where her face was most visible and compared it to Callie's photo. The resemblance was undeniable. He stood and went to his office. Inside a file drawer were all the notes and documents related to Callie's disappearance, folder upon folder stuffed with police reports, transcripts of interviews, theories, and investigations that led nowhere. He opened the main folder and began reviewing his notes. Callie had disappeared on a Sunday in October, around 4 in the afternoon. She'd been at Riverside Park with Diane, the babysitter. Diane left her playing in the sandbox while talking to another babysitter. When she looked back, Callie was gone. The initial search turned up nothing but Rosie, found on a side path. No witnesses had seen anyone taking a child. No security cameras in the area had recorded anything useful. The abandoned subway line Marla mentioned was less than a mile from the park. Was it possible someone had led Callie there, then abandoned her, or that she had wandered there on her own, lost and scared? Jack checked the dates on the reports. Marla had said she found Lena nearly 3 years ago, which aligned with the time of Callie's disappearance. She also said Lena was very young, which fit Callie's age at the time, just 3 years old. He went back to the bedroom and picked up Rosie again. The doll was now more than a memory. It was a silent witness, a link between past and present. If Lena really was Callie, Rosie would be the concrete proof. Would the girl recognize her old companion? But how to do this without frightening the child, without creating a confrontation with Marla and Walter, who had clearly loved and cared for her over the past 3 years? Jack sat on the edge of the bed, pressing Rosie to his chest. All the evidence pointed to Lena being Callie. The timing, the age, the physical traits, the birthmark, even her fragmented memories of a red-dressed doll. In his heart, he believed he'd found his daughter, but he needed certainty, absolute certainty, before he acted. Before potentially turning everyone's life upside down, a DNA test would be conclusive. But how could he get a sample without arousing suspicion? And if the test confirmed what he felt in his soul, then what? Would he take Lena away from those who had lovingly cared for her? Would he initiate a legal battle that might traumatize her even more? Jack carefully put Rosie back in the box. He'd come up with a plan tomorrow. He'd find a way to get definitive proof and, more importantly, a way to resolve the situation in a manner that prioritized Callie's happiness, Lena's happiness, above all else. Because, beyond anything else, his daughter deserved peace. She deserved love. And that meant, regardless of the result, difficult decisions lay ahead. Jack closed the wooden box and returned it to the closet. For the first time in 3 years, he truly felt alive, with purpose. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else, hope. 2 days after visiting Marla and Walt's place, Jack parked his car in front of their small apartment building. In the passenger seat and trunk were shopping bags, groceries, cleaning supplies, some clothes for Lena, items he'd carefully chosen, thinking about the family's needs. He was still unsure how to proceed. After a sleepless night reviewing photos and documents, he was more convinced than ever. Lena was Callie, his daughter who vanished 3 years ago, but how to address that? How to reveal the truth without destroying the girl's world? He decided to start with a gesture of goodwill, helping the family who, despite the circumstances, had cared for his daughter with love. He carried the first bags up the stairs and knocked lightly on the green door of apartment 302. He heard hurried footsteps and Lena's excited voice. "It must be Jack!" "Aunt Marla, Jack is here." The door opened and there she was, her bright blue eyes lighting up as she saw him. She wore shorts and a simple shirt, looking neater than before. Her hair was combed, her face clean. "You really came," she said, practically jumping for joy. Jack smiled. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Marla appeared behind Lena, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked tired, but less suspicious than during their first meeting. "Mr. Cooper, what a surprise." "I brought some things," Jack said, holding up the shopping bags. "There's more in the car." Marla's expression wavered between gratitude and wounded pride. "You didn't have to—" "It's not charity," Jack assured, sensing her discomfort. "Think of it as an advance. I spoke to some contacts and got job interviews lined up for Walt at 2 construction companies." Marla's eyes widened. "Really?" Jack nodded. "They're on Monday. I wrote down the addresses and times." Walter emerged from inside the apartment. "Did I hear something about job interviews?" 2, Jack confirmed. "They're good firms, with proper contracts and benefits. I'm sure you'll get one of them." Walter offered a firm handshake. "I don't know how to thank you." "Help me bring the rest in," Jack suggested, heading back down with Walter. As they descended, Walter seemed to want to say something. Finally, he spoke. "Why are you doing this for us? You hardly know us." Jack opened the trunk, revealing more bags. "Let's just say, I know what it's like to struggle." It wasn't really a lie. After Callie disappeared, Jack fell into a deep depression, lost his job, nearly lost his home. Only friends' support had kept him from hitting rock bottom. They hauled the groceries upstairs. Inside the modest apartment, Lena was already rummaging through the first bags, discovering the clothes Jack had bought for her. "Look, Aunt Marla, a new dress." Marla looked both touched and embarrassed. Jack noticed her unease and intervened. "I heard your birthday is coming up, Lena. Consider it an early present." He had no idea when her birthday was, of course, but the excuse seemed to work. Marla relaxed a bit. "I'm going to try it on," Lena exclaimed, running to another room with the yellow dress in hand. Marla started unpacking the groceries, arranging them in the nearly empty cupboards. Jack and Walter helped quietly, a joint effort creating an unusual sense of closeness. "This will make a huge difference for us," Marla finally said, placing a bag of rice on the shelf. "Thank you." Jack nodded. "You seem like good people, and it's obvious you love Lena." The couple exchanged a loaded look. Jack sensed there was still much they hadn't shared about how the little girl had come into their lives, but that was a conversation for another time. Lena returned, wearing the yellow dress Jack had bought. She twirled around the living room, showing off. "How do I look?" "Beautiful," Jack replied, a lump in his throat. Yellow was Callie's favorite color. He'd chosen the dress with that in mind. "You really are," Marla agreed, adjusting the collar, "but we need to save it for special occasions." "But today is special," Lena protested. "Jack came to visit." Jack laughed. "You know what would make it even more special? If you came with me for a walk, it's a nice day out." The girl's eyes shone with excitement. "Can I, Aunt Marla, please?" Marla hesitated, glancing at Walt. It was clear she was reluctant to let Lena go off with a stranger, even one who'd been so generous. "We'll stay in the neighborhood," Jack promised. "Maybe grab some ice cream at that corner shop. You can come along too if you want." Walter placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "I think it's fine. We'll finish unpacking the groceries." Jack understood the subtext. They wanted to talk alone, without Lena present. "We'll be back in an hour, tops," he promised. Lena grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the door, eager to leave. The feel of her small hand in his brought back memories that nearly made him cry. How many times had Callie held his hand like that, trusting and excited? They went down the stairs and walked along the sidewalk. The neighborhood wasn't the best, but it seemed calm at that time of day. Some people chatted on their doorsteps. Children played in a small makeshift playground. "Where are we going?" Lena asked, hopping beside him. "How about ice cream first, and then we can check out that park?" Jack pointed to a small green area about a block away. Lena agreed enthusiastically. At the ice cream shop, she chose strawberry, while Jack got chocolate. They sat on a bench to enjoy their treat. "Are you rich?" she asked suddenly, with the frankness only a child can have. Jack smiled. "Not exactly. I have enough money to live comfortably. Uncle Walt says one day we'll be rich too, when he finds a good job." "I'm sure he will," Jack replied. "Your uncle seems like a hard-working man." Lena licked her ice cream thoughtfully. Do you have a family, Jack? The question caught him by surprise. Jack hesitated, looking into the distance. I had a daughter, he said finally, his voice low. She disappeared, and after that, everything lost its color. It was the first time he'd spoken of it so simply, without the weight of details, circumstances, or blame. Just the raw truth. He had a daughter. She vanished, and the world became colorless. Lena stopped eating and looked at him with her big blue eyes. A surprising empathy passed through her gaze, beyond her years. Without a word, she reached out and took his free hand. Maybe she's closer than you think, she said, with a wisdom that seemed far too deep for a 6-year-old. Jack felt his heart skip a beat. Could it be, on some level, she knew that she had memories, intuitions? He smiled, fighting back tears that threatened to surface. The love was there, the same love he'd felt the moment he held Callie in his arms for the first time in the hospital, the same love that had kept him going through 3 years of searching. But it still wasn't time to reveal everything. Who knows, he replied, gently squeezing the child's hand. They finished their ice cream and walked over to the small park. Lena showed him her favorite spots, the tree where she liked to hide, the bench where she sat to draw, the stepping stones she pretended were a river. Jack watched her, memorizing every movement, every expression. It was like rediscovering his daughter, getting to know her again after 3 years. It was both painful and wonderful. When they returned to the apartment, Marla and Walt seemed to have made some sort of decision. A new calmness surrounded them, a quiet determination. Lena, sweetheart, Marla said, why don't you go play in your room for a bit? The grown-ups need to talk. The girl made a face but obeyed. When the bedroom door closed, a heavy silence fell over the room. Thank you for everything you've done for us, Walter began. Groceries, clothes, job interviews. It means a lot. Jack nodded. It was nothing. But, Marla continued, hesitant, we need to know why. Why are you so interested in our family? In Lena? This was the moment Jack had both dreaded and expected. He took a deep breath, preparing himself. 3 years ago, he began, my daughter Callie disappeared. She was at Riverside Park with her babysitter. 1 minute she was there, the next she was gone. Marla and Walter tensed, their faces growing guarded. I looked everywhere. I offered rewards, went on TV, handed out flyers. Not a day went by that I didn't search for her. Jack took a photo of Callie from his pocket and placed it on the table. A little girl of 3, shining blue eyes, brown hair, a dazzling smile. The resemblance to Lena was unmistakable. When I met Lena at the bakery, I noticed the birthmark on her ankle, identical to Callie's. Same shape, same place. Then I saw her eyes, her smile, the way she tilts her head when she talks. Everything matched. The couple stared at the photo in silence. Marla's face had turned pale. Walter's fists clenched, as if bracing for a fight. I believe Lena is my daughter, Callie, Jack finally said. All the evidence points to that. The age, the timeline, her physical appearance, and the birthmark. A thick silence ensued. Marla was the first to speak, her voice trembling. You came to take her away. The question was loaded with fear and pain. Jack shook his head. I didn't come to take her away from you. I came to find the truth. So Lena knows who she really is. And then, Walter asked, his voice tight. Then, Jack said, we'll figure out what's best for her alone, not for me, not for you, for Lena. Marla began to cry softly, tears streaming down her tired face. Walter wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She's everything we have, Marla murmured. I know, Jack replied, and I can see you love her, that you cared for her when I couldn't. We found her, Walter said finally, echoing Marla's earlier words about the station. Like Marla told you, in that abandoned station, she was alone, scared. We couldn't just leave her. I understand and I thank you for caring for her, but she has the right to know the truth, to know her real story. Marla wiped her tears and, surprisingly, nodded. I always knew this day might come, she said softly. I always knew she was too special to be just ours. Jack felt a lump in his throat at the dignity and acceptance of this woman. "I don't want to take her from you," he assured. "I just want to be part of her life. I want her to know she was never abandoned, that she was always loved, always looked for." Marla looked at him, her eyes still full of tears but calm. "She's always been love," she said, voice breaking. "From the first moment, and now love is coming back to her." Jack reached out and placed his fingers lightly over Marla's on the table. A simple gesture, loaded with meaning. A truce, a shared understanding that Lena's well-being came first. "How do we do this?" Walter asked. "How do we tell her?" "Gently," Jack replied, "one step at a time. First, we need to be absolutely sure. A DNA test." "It's not necessary," Marla interrupted. "Looking at this photo, at you, there's no doubt. She's your daughter." Jack felt tears he could no longer contain slipping freely down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered, "for taking care of her, for keeping her safe." Marla squeezed his hand. "And now," she said, "let's find a way to make this work. For her, just for her." Jack nodded, speechless. In the other room, they could hear Lena's voice singing a little song. It was the most precious sound in the world, a sound he'd thought never to hear again, the sound of hope reborn. 3 days had passed since Jack's talk with Marla and Walt. 3 days of careful planning, hushed conversations while Lena played in the other room, and difficult decisions made amid tears and tentative smiles. It was time to tell the girl the truth. Jack awoke early that morning, filled with a nervousness he hadn't felt since the day Callie was born. He took a long shower, dressed carefully, and placed in his pocket a small object he'd prepared for this day. A silver locket containing photos of himself and Callie, taken on her 3rd birthday. It would be a gift to mark the beginning of their new life together. Everything had been arranged with Marla and Walt. They would tell Lena the truth together, as a united family trying to do the best for the child they all loved. Afterward, Jack would take her to see his house, the place where she had lived the first 3 years of her life, now lost from her memory. The plan was simple. Jack would pick up Lena at 2 in the afternoon. They'd go back to Marla and Walt's apartment, and all of them would sit down with the girl. They'd explain in terms a 6-year-old could grasp. They'd reassure her that her routine wouldn't change, that she'd only be gaining another home, another parent, more love in her life. As he drove to Marla and Walt's neighborhood, Jack rehearsed mentally what he'd say. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the aunt and uncle she knew weren't actually related to her? How do you make her understand that he, nearly a stranger, was her real father, that her name wasn't Lena, but Callie? It was a heavy truth for a small child, but it had to be done. They all agreed on that. Jack parked in front of the building at exactly 2 o'clock. Before he could get out of the car, he saw Marla running toward him, her face twisted with worry. "We can't find her," she said breathlessly. "Lena went out to play an hour ago and hasn't come back." Jack's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, she hasn't come back? Where did she go to play?" "The little park, like always. Walt already checked there. She wasn't there. We're searching everywhere." Jack tried to stay calm, though panic was flooding him like a tidal wave. "Let's split up," he said, taking charge. "I'll drive around the area. Walt can check other places she might go. You stay here in case she comes back. Let's exchange phone numbers." They hurriedly swapped numbers and went in different directions. Jack got back in the car and drove through the neighborhood, slowing down at every corner, scanning each group of children, every nook where a small girl might be. After 20 minutes with no sign of her, panic gave way to despair. The sky, once clear, darkened rapidly. Heavy grey clouds gathered, threatening a storm. "Not again," he muttered, a lump in his throat. "Please, not again." Memories came rushing back in painful flashes. The park 3 years ago, the babysitter's phone call, the frantic search, the emptiness that followed. It was like reliving the worst day of his life, as if he were being wrenched from his own story again. His chance for happiness ripped away once more. He stopped the car and called Marla. "Any news?" he asked, unable to hide the distress in his voice. "Nothing. Walt's checked the whole neighborhood. I'm calling our neighbors. I'm going to head to the bakery where I first met her. Maybe she went there. He hung up and drove toward the bakery a few miles away. The sky kept darkening, and the first raindrops began to hit the windshield. At the bakery, the clerk who knew him said she hadn't seen Lena that day. Jack left his number again, asking her to call immediately if the girl showed up. Back in the car, he phoned Marla again. "I'm heading back to your apartment. We need to call the police." "Walt doesn't want to involve the police," Marla replied, voice trembling. "He's afraid they'll take Lena away from us." Jack closed his eyes, understanding their predicament. The couple had no legal custody of the girl. If the truth came out, "Let's keep looking for one more hour," he decided. "If we don't find her, we'll have to call the police, no matter the consequences." The rain intensified, quickly turning into a storm. The wind whipped through the trees, and the pounding rain on the car roof was deafening. Jack struggled to see through the windshield, scanning the near-deserted streets for any sign of a small figure. That was when his phone rang. It was Walt. "I found someone who saw her," he said, his voice barely audible over the downpour. "A lady near the convenience store. She said she saw Lena walking alone about an hour ago, heading toward the municipal park." The municipal park was a few blocks away, a larger, more developed space than the small park near their place, complete with an artificial lake and newer playground equipment. "I'm on my way," Jack answered, taking a sharp turn. He arrived at the park in under 5 minutes. He parked haphazardly and jumped out into the rain, which soaked him instantly. The park was empty, the playground equipment abandoned and swaying in the wind. "Lena!" he shouted, running through the soggy pathways. "Lena, where are you?" Only the storm responded. Jack kept searching, despair growing each second. He ran around the lake, checked every slide, every swing, every corner where a child might hide. Nothing. Heart pounding with terror, Jack stopped in the middle of the park, rain streaming down his face, blending with tears he couldn't hold back. "Please," he pleaded to the stormy sky, "don't take her from me again." "Not now." Then he noticed, across the street bordering the park, a row of small shops. Most were closed due to the storm, but their facades offered a little shelter under the eaves. Something pushed him that way. He dashed out of the park, crossing the street in the pouring rain, ignoring the cars honking at him. He began checking each storefront, each covered doorway. At the third shop, a small bookstore that was closed, he saw a tiny figure huddled against the glass door. Brown hair, drenched. A yellow dress, soaked. The dress he'd bought her. "Lena!" he shouted, racing toward her. The girl lifted her face, her blue eyes wide with surprise. "Jack, what are you doing out in the rain?" He knelt before her, taking her icy little hands in his, frantically checking if she was okay, if she was hurt. "We've been looking everywhere for you," he said, voice quivering with emotion. "Your Aunt Marla, your Uncle Walt, all of us. We were so worried." Lena looked genuinely surprised. "But I just came to see the big park. When it started raining, I came here. I was waiting for the rain to stop so I could go back." The simplicity of her explanation, the natural way she spoke, as if there were nothing strange about a 6-year-old walking alone through the city and sheltering from a storm, broke Jack's heart. "You can't go off like that without telling anyone," he said, trying not to sound too harsh. "We were worried sick." "I'm sorry," she replied, lowering her eyes. "I wanted to see the ducks in the lake. People say there are ducks here." Jack managed to smile, despite the tension that still gripped him. "Yes, there are ducks. I can bring you another day to see them. But for now, we need to get back. Your Aunt Marla must be frantic." He pulled out his phone and called Marla, letting her know the good news. Then he took off his jacket and draped it over Lena, picking her up in his arms. "Let's get to the car. It's too cold out here." She nestled against his chest, her thin arms around his neck. Jack felt a wave of love so intense it almost knocked him over. His daughter, his Callie. Finally in his arms again, they ran to the car, shielding themselves as best they could from the relentless rain. Jack cranked the heater to full blast, handing Lena a blanket he kept in the glove box for emergencies. "Better?" he asked, seeing her wrap herself in the soft fabric. She nodded, her wet hair plastered to her face, her lips slightly blue from the cold. "Thanks for finding me, Jack." At that moment, Looking at the little face he'd almost lost twice, Jack knew he couldn't wait any longer. Life was too fragile, precious moments too fleeting. "Lena," he began, turning toward her. "I have something very important to tell you." She looked up, curiosity shining in those big blue eyes. "Do you remember when I told you I had a daughter who disappeared?" Lena nodded. "You looked sad when you talked about her." "Yes, I was sad, because I missed her so much. I searched everywhere for her for a very long time." Jack took her tiny hands in his, aware that what he was about to say would change her life forever. "Lena, I believe, no, I'm certain, you are my daughter. Your real name is Callie, and I'm your father." The girl froze, eyes wide as she tried to process those massive words. "But the Uncle Walt is my dad," she said finally, confused. "Uncle Walt and Aunt Marla took very good care of you these past 3 years," Jack explained gently. "They love you very much. But before that, you lived with me. Your name was Callie, Callie Ann Cooper." "Callie," she repeated softly, as though testing the sound of the name. "Yes. You were only 3 when we got separated. It's normal that you don't remember." Lena, Callie, looked out the window at the rain. Jack waited, giving her time to take it all in. "How do you know it's me?" she finally asked, with a surprising maturity. Jack smiled. "Lots of things. Your blue eyes, just like mine, your smile, and especially the birthmark on your ankle. The crescent moon. My daughter Callie had the exact same one." The little girl lifted the hem of her soaked dress and looked at the mark that had always been there. "I have photos of you as a baby," Jack continued. "I have your birth certificate. And I have your doll Rosie, the one you dropped the day we lost each other." "A doll with a red dress?" she asked, suddenly looking at him. Jack's heart pounded. "Yes, how do you know?" "I sometimes dream about her," she said simply, "but I thought it was just a dream." The tears Jack had been holding back finally spilled over. He pulled the child into a tight hug, feeling her small, fragile body against him. "You have 2 families now," he whispered into her wet hair. "Uncle Walt and Aunt Marla, who love you so much, and me, your dad, who never stopped looking for you. You'll never be alone again." When they finally parted, Jack saw that her eyes were brimming too, though no tears fell. She studied him intently, as if searching his face for something familiar, something that would spark an old memory. "Callie," she said again, thinking it through. "Callie Cooper." A small smile crept onto her lips. "I like it," she said finally. "It sounds like me." Jack smiled through his own tears. This was the beginning of something new, the start of a long journey of rediscovery and reconnection. It wouldn't be easy. There would be confusion, questions, maybe even anger or sadness, but they were together now, and that was all that mattered. "Let's go home," Jack said, starting the car. "I have so many things to show you." "Which home?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Aunt Marla's or yours?" "First we'll stop at Aunt Marla's so she and Uncle Walt know you're safe. Then you can see our home. The home where you were born." She nodded, satisfied with that answer. As the car made its way through the rain-soaked streets, the storm began to let up. The last rays of the afternoon sun broke through the dispersing clouds. Jack glanced at the little girl in the passenger seat, his daughter, Callie. After 3 years of darkness, light was finally returning to his life. The night was long. After finding Lena, now Callie, under the bookstore awning, Jack had taken her back to Marla and Walt's apartment. Between tight hugs, tears, and explanations, the 3 adults finally told the girl the whole truth. It was a hard conversation, with simple questions that required complex answers. "So you're not really my aunt and uncle?" she asked Marla and Walt, confused. "Not by blood, sweetheart," Marla replied, holding her little hands. "But we're your aunt and uncle at heart. We always will be. And he's my real dad." She pointed at Jack. "Yes," Walt confirmed, his voice breaking. "Your real father." The girl absorbed the information silently, her big blue eyes flicking from one face to another, as if looking for something familiar in her suddenly upside-down world. "We'll do a test," Jack explained gently. "A test that shows when a father and daughter are really related. Then tomorrow we'll know for sure." She nodded seriously. She didn't cry, didn't run away, she just accepted it, with the surprising resilience of children. They spent the night all together in the apartment. Jack slept on the small couch, folding his long legs to fit in the cramped space. He didn't mind the discomfort. He was close to his daughter, nothing else mattered. In the morning, Walt took them all to a clinic Jack had arranged. The procedure was quick and simple, a swab inside the cheek for both Jack and Callie. The results would be ready in a few hours, given the urgency Jack requested. By noon, Jack's phone rang. He stepped away from the others to take the call. When he returned, his face was transformed, a radiant smile, tears brimming. "Positive," he announced, his voice trembling. 99.9998% probability of paternity. Marla wept quietly. Walt held her, his eyes also misty. Callie, sitting between them on a clinic bench, looked at Jack with growing curiosity. "So you really are my dad," she said, not as a question but a statement. Jack knelt before her. "Yes, Callie, I am your father." The little girl reached out and touched his face, her tiny fingers tracing his features as though memorizing them. "Can I see your house now?" she asked, surprising them all with the simplicity of her request. Jack looked to Marla and Walt, who silently nodded. "Our house," he corrected gently. "Yes, you can." They had lunch, and then came a tense moment of parting. Although they all agreed Callie would spend some days with Jack, getting to know his home and her own story, the separation was still difficult. "We'll see each other every day," Jack assured Marla and Walt. "And you'll always be part of her life." Marla hugged Callie tightly, fighting back tears. "Have fun, sweetheart, and remember, we love you very much." Walt simply hugged her, unable to speak without breaking down. Callie promised to come back soon, not fully grasping the emotional weight of the moment. And so Jack and Callie were in the car, heading for the house where they'd once lived together years ago, a house she didn't remember, but that had been her first home. "Is it far?" she asked, watching the unfamiliar streets pass by. "Not too far, about 20 minutes. Is it a big house?" Jack smiled. "Not really big, but comfortable. It has a backyard where you used to play." "I used to play there." "Yes, when you were very little. There's a swing your grandpa built for you." She absorbed that in silence. "I have a grandpa." "You had one," Jack corrected gently. "My father. He passed away right before you, before we got separated." Callie nodded, staring out the window again. Jack wondered what was going through her mind. So many changes, so much new information in a short time. Finally, they arrived. Jack parked in front of a two-story house with a white exterior and blue shutters, a small, well-kept garden out front. "This is it," he announced, turning off the engine. "We're home." Callie peered through the window, studying the house with curiosity. Jack exited and opened her door, offering his hand. She took it and got out, her gaze still fixed on the building as if waiting for it to speak, to reveal a secret. They walked to the front door together. Jack felt Callie's hand tighten around his as he inserted the key. A click, and the door opened. "Welcome," he said, his voice barely above a whisper with emotion. They stepped inside. The living room was neat and tidy, furnished simply but tastefully. On the walls, a few framed photos, most of them of Callie as a baby. Jack watched his daughter look around, her blue eyes taking in every detail. "Want a tour?" he asked. She nodded, still holding his hand. They started with the living room, then the kitchen. Jack showed her the backyard with its faded swing. She touched the rusty chain with interest. "This is where you took your first steps," Jack said, pointing to the patch of grass. "You fell and got up many times until you managed to walk on your own." "You were so determined," Callie smiled. A small but genuine smile. It was the first time she'd really smiled since learning the truth. They went back inside and climbed the stairs. Jack showed her his own room, the bathroom, a small library. Finally, they stopped in front of a closed door, painted a pale yellow. "This," he said, his voice unsteady, "was your room." He turned the knob and slowly opened the door. The room was almost exactly as it had been 3 years ago. Softly painted walls, a small bed with a floral comforter, a shelf with children's books. some toys neatly arranged, a white dresser next to the bed. And on top of the dresser, sitting as though awaiting someone, was Rosie. Jack watched as Callie entered the room slowly, her eyes locked on the rag doll in the red polka dot dress. For a moment, he feared she wouldn't recognize it, that the dreams she'd mentioned wouldn't be enough to trigger a real memory. But then Callie ran to the dresser. She picked up the doll gently, as though it was precious and fragile. She hugged it to her chest and closed her eyes. "This was mine," she whispered, reopening her eyes, shining with excitement. "I remember her." Jack felt his heart skip a beat. He swallowed the lump in his throat, fighting not to cry. "Yes," he managed. "That's Rosie. She was your favorite doll. She stayed with me all this time, waiting for you to come back." Callie ran her hand over the doll's red yarn hair, its button eyes, the dress faded by time. Recognition filled her gaze. "Rosie," she whispered, testing the name. "My friend Rosie." Jack approached and sat on the edge of the bed, watching the silent reunion. Years of pain, searching and nearly broken hope converged in this simple and miraculous moment. Callie looked around the room, absorbing its details. Her eyes came to rest on the blank white ceiling. "Could we have stars on the ceiling?" she asked suddenly, still clutching the doll. Jack smiled, tears finally escaping his eyes. "We can have the entire sky if you want," he replied, voice trembling. She smiled and, in a gesture that took Jack completely by surprise, moved closer and hugged him. A small, tentative hug, but a hug nonetheless, the first one she'd initiated. "Thank you," she said simply. Jack hugged her back, feeling her small frame in his arms. That moment, that embrace, was worth every second of the 3-year search, every tear, every sleepless night. "You're welcome, my daughter," he said, savoring each word. "Welcome home." Through the bedroom window, the soft evening light poured in, golden and warm. On Callie's lap, Rosie seemed to smile with her stitched red lips. And in Jack's heart, for the first time in 3 years, there was complete peace. The house, once empty, was now full of hope, of possibilities, of love, full of sky. Autumn arrived, coloring the trees in shades of red and gold. 3 months had passed since Jack found Callie. 3 months of adjustment, of rebuilding, of forming a new routine with patience and love. The first week was hard. Callie swung between moments of joy at finding her real dad and moments of sadness at missing Marla and Walt. Jack noticed when she'd go quiet, hugging Rosie, staring out the window with distant eyes. "Do you miss them?" he asked her one day. She just nodded, no words. "We can visit them today if you want." Her face lit up. "Really?" "Of course. I promised they'd always be part of your life, remember?" Jack kept that promise. Not only did he allow frequent visits, but he encouraged them, preserving Callie's bond with the couple who had raised her for 3 years. Surprisingly, to many, including the judge who finalized Callie's return to her biological father, Jack never pressed criminal charges against Marla or Walt. They found her lost and loved her, he told his lawyer, who insisted on prosecuting for harboring a minor. "I'm not going to ruin the lives of people who saved my daughter." Instead, Jack did something unexpected. He helped them financially. Walt got a job at one of the construction companies Jack recommended, but the starting pay was modest. Jack offered assistance so they could move to a better apartment closer to his own house, making Callie's visits easier. "We can't accept," Walt refused at first, pride wounded. "We already took your daughter for 3 years." "You didn't take anything," Jack countered. "I'm offering this, for Callie, so she can have everyone she loves close by." Jack's gentle persistence finally wore down the couple's resistance. They found a modest 2-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from Jack's home, enough space for Callie to feel at home during visits. "The second bedroom is for you," Marla told the girl, showing her the new place. "So you have a place whenever you stay with us." It became part of the routine. Callie spent most of her time with Jack, but slept at Marla and Walt's twice a week. She had clothes, toys, and books in both homes. Over time, this unusual arrangement began to feel normal. The transition to a new school took time, too. Jack enrolled her in a better institution closer to his house, but maintained contact with her old teacher and classmates. They explained the situation to the principal and new teachers, who were understanding and helped Callie adjust. "How was school today?" Jack asked each afternoon when he picked her up. Early on, her answers were brief and shy. Over the weeks, she grew more talkative, sharing stories about new friends, art classes, and the book her teacher read to the class. At home, Jack transformed her bedroom into the sky he'd promised. He hired an artist to paint a mural of the solar system on the ceiling. Stars, planets, comets, all glowing in the dark when the lights went out. Callie loved lying in bed before sleep, gazing at her private universe above her. "Dad," she said one night, the words still sounding fresh and experimental on her lips, "why did you look for me for so long?" "Uncle Walt said it was a really long time." Jack sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Because you're part of me," he said eventually. "It was like someone took a piece of my heart. I couldn't live fully without you." Callie thought about that, her blue eyes reflecting the painted stars on the ceiling. "Aunt Marla said they looked for me too when I got lost, but they never found me." "They found you in a different way," Jack said gently, "and took very good care of you. That's why they'll always be your family too." This acceptance, that mutual respect among the adults, made all the difference. Callie never had to choose between Jack and the couple who raised her. She was never forced to reject one past to embrace another. Instead, she was encouraged to weave all parts of her story into one unique, special narrative. Over the first holidays after being reunited, everyone worked to create new traditions. For Callie's 7th birthday, they had 2 parties, one at Jack's house and one at Marla and Walt's. At Christmas, Callie opened gifts under the tree at her dad's house in the morning and had dinner with her aunt and uncle at night. New Year's Eve, they celebrated together. "I never thought this was possible," Marla said to Jack during one of these gatherings, watching Callie and Walt assemble a puzzle at the dining table. "I thought you'd hate us." "Hate would only bring more pain," Jack replied, "for all of us, especially Callie." The wisdom of that decision manifested each day. Callie thrived, shielded by the love of 3 adults who placed her well-being above everything else. Her grades in school improved. At home, she slept better, free of the nightmares that had plagued her in the first days after the revelation. The professionals Jack consulted, a pediatrician and a child psychologist, were impressed by her progress. "Children are resilient," the psychologist explained, "especially when they feel safe and have consistency." And safety was one thing Callie had in abundance. She knew she was loved, cared for, valued. She knew she had not just one, but 2 homes where she was welcome. 2 families that respected one another. "Have you thought of getting married again?" Walt asked Jack one day, while they watched Callie and Marla plant flowers in the small garden of the couple's new apartment. Jack smiled, surprised by the question. "I haven't, actually. Right now, Callie is my priority." "She needs a mother," Walt commented. "Not that you're not enough, but I know what you mean." "But she has Marla, and for now that seems to be enough." Time rolled on, the seasons changed, and Callie grew. The traumas of the past didn't vanish completely. Sometimes she still woke up confused, calling for Marla in the middle of the night. Other times she panicked if Jack was late picking her up from school, afraid of being abandoned again. But those moments became fewer, overshadowed by happy days, shared triumphs, and new memories formed. One Sunday afternoon, Jack took Callie to a park, not Riverside Park where she'd disappeared, but a new one closer to their home. He sat on a bench while she played on the swing, her laughter echoing in the air. Watching his daughter, Jack felt a peace he never thought possible a few months ago. The emptiness he'd carried for 3 years was now filled, not just by Callie's presence, but by what they'd built. Something rare and precious, an extended family, united not by blood or obligation, but by love and respect. On the swing, Callie rose higher and higher, her brown hair flying in the wind, her face lit with joy. Safe, loved, known. The bonds between them weren't conventional, but they were real and strong, and most importantly, they would remain, growing, evolving. flourishing just like Callie herself. Rain tapped softly on the windows that Sunday afternoon. Jack and Callie had cancelled their trip to the zoo because of the weather. Instead, they decided to stay home, watch a movie, and bake cookies. It was a perfect day to snuggle under a blanket with hot chocolate and stories. They were in the living room, Callie sketching in her new drawing pad, Jack reading a book, when the girl asked suddenly, "Did I have a mum?" The question caught him off guard. In all the months since she'd come to live with him, she had never asked about her mother. Jack slowly closed his book. "Yes, you did," he said, thinking carefully about how to answer. "Her name was Helen." Callie set down her colored pencil and looked at him with eyes so much like his. "Where is she?" Jack took a deep breath. He'd prepared for this moment, but it was still hard. "Your mom passed away when you were born, Callie. There were complications during the delivery." The girl absorbed the information with a seriousness beyond her 7 years. "She died so I could be born." "Not exactly," Jack gently clarified. "She got sick very suddenly, and the doctors tried to save her, but they couldn't. It wasn't anyone's fault, especially not yours." Callie nodded, processing. "Do you have pictures of her?" Jack's heart pounded. It was as though she'd read his mind. "I do," he answered. "Actually, I was thinking of showing them to you. I think you're old enough now." He got up and walked to the bookshelf. Behind a few volumes, he pulled out a rectangular wooden box, similar to the one containing Rosie, but larger. He carried it back and sat beside Callie on the couch. "This is a special album," he said, opening the box, "with photos of you when you were a baby, and some of your mum. I've been saving it for when you were older." Inside was a navy blue leather-bound album with the initials C.A.C., Callie Ann Cooper, embossed in gold. Jack opened it carefully. On the first page, a photo of a young, beautiful woman with long brown hair and bright green eyes. "This is Helen." "Your mother," Jack explained. "She was a photographer. She loved taking pictures of landscapes, sunsets, flowers." Callie looked at the photo intently, as if she wanted to memorize every detail. "She was pretty." "Very," Jack agreed, turning to the next page. "This is from our wedding." Helen wore a simple white lace dress, her hair in a loose bun with small flowers. Next to her, Jack looked nervous and incredibly happy. "You loved each other?" Callie asked. "Very much. It was a whirlwind romance, but intense. We met when she was hired to photograph one of my architecture projects. 6 months later, we were married." The following pages showed the couple in various settings at the beach, in a park, cooking together. Helen appeared pregnant in the last photos, her belly growing, her smile more radiant each time. "She was so happy you were on the way," Jack said, his voice cracking a little. "She set up your room, picked your name. She made Rosie by hand, just for you." They reached photos of Callie as a baby, newborn at the hospital, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Her first baths, her first solid foods, her first tooth, her first steps. "That's me," she asked, pointing to a photo where she was about a year old, covered in mashed peas. Jack laughed. "Yes, you hated peas. You still do, as far as I can tell." Callie grinned. "Peas are awful." They kept going. There were many pictures until Callie was 3 years old, and then nothing. The rest of the pages were blank, a void symbolizing the 3 lost years, the time they'd spent apart. Jack watched his daughter run her fingers over the empty pages, her expression thoughtful. "Why are there no more pictures?" she asked. "Because that's when we lost each other," he said gently. "I couldn't photograph your growing up anymore." Callie nodded, understanding. She stayed quiet for a few moments, still looking at the empty pages. "We need to take new pictures," she said decisively, "to fill this album with the new part of our story." Jack felt something warm spread in his chest. "Yes, we do. You're absolutely right." "Can we start today?" she asked, excited. "Even though it's raining, we can do it inside, us baking cookies." "Sure," Jack said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "I'll get the camera." As Jack got up, Callie continued flipping through the album, now smiling. "You know," she said, just as he was leaving the room, "it's kind of strange." "What is, sweetie?" "Before, I only had Aunt Marla and Uncle Walt. Now I have two dads. Jack paused, heart pounding. Two dads? Yeah. Uncle Walt always told me to call him Dad. And now there's you, my real dad. She turned, looking at him with those blue eyes so much like his own. Can I call you Dad, or do you want me to call you Jack? It was as if all the air had left the room. Jack felt tears spring to his eyes. Since their reunion, Callie had still called him by his name. He'd chosen not to pressure her, giving her time to adapt. Now, suddenly, I would love for you to call me Dad, he managed, his voice trembling with emotion. Callie smiled that radiant smile that always melted his heart. Okay then, Dad. The simple word, just 3 letters, seemed more precious than any jewel. Jack crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling and pulling his daughter into a gentle, yet tight embrace, as if she might vanish. I love you so much, he whispered into her hair. I love you too, Dad, she replied, her thin arms wrapping around his neck. They stayed like that for a long moment, hugging on the sofa with the open album on Callie's lap. The rain kept falling outside, but inside that house, a private sun glowed bright. A sun made of reconciliation, healing and renewed love. When they finally let go, Jack discreetly wiped his eyes. I'll get the camera, then we can make those cookies, okay? With chocolate chips? Lots of chocolate chips, he promised. As Jack left the room, Callie returned to examining the photo album. She touched the picture of Helen, then the blank pages. A small, knowing smile curled her lips, as if she, at 7, understood something profound about life, loss, and new beginnings. The blank album no longer symbolized just the lost years. It had become a promise of the future, a space waiting to be filled with new memories, new joys, the continuation of a story that refused to end. The backyard was in celebration. Roses, daisies, and sunflowers filled the garden beds that Jack and Callie had planted together months ago. Beneath the apple tree, tables with colorful tablecloths, arrangements of wildflowers, and yellow and blue balloons swayed in the warm summer breeze. A handmade banner read, Happy Reunion Anniversary. A whole year had passed. A year since Jack and Callie became father and daughter again. To commemorate the date, Jack organized a simple but meaningful party. He didn't want anything extravagant, just cherished people, good food, and a chance to give thanks for the miracle that had changed their lives. Marla and Walt were the first to arrive, carrying a large chocolate cake with blue frosting, a reminder of that first meeting in the bakery. Callie's face lit up at the sight of them. Soon, neighbors, classmates, and friends from school arrived, including the teacher who had helped her adjust. Lively conversations and laughter filled the perfumed afternoon air. Kids ran between the flower beds, carefully dodging the blooms. The dessert table overflowed with cupcakes, pies, and cookies, many baked by Callie herself, proud of her new baking skills. Jack watched it all from the porch, a sense of completeness warming his heart. His house, once so empty and quiet, now overflowed with life. He smiled at the sight of Walt manning the grill, Marla arranging desserts. Over the past months, they had formed an unlikely but genuine partnership, united by love for the little girl in the yellow dress. Everything is perfect, Marla said, approaching with 2 cups of lemonade. Wouldn't be possible without you, Jack replied sincerely. Callie ran across the lawn. Rosie clutched to her chest. Her yellow dress fluttered like butterfly wings. She paused here and there, introducing her doll to the guests, proudly explaining that Rosie was special, made by a mother she'd never known. As the sun began to set, everyone gathered to sing Happy Anniversary. Callie's face shone in the glow of the candles, her blue eyes reflecting the golden flame. After they cut the cake, while the guests chatted happily, she tugged on Jack's sleeve, looking at him with that serious expression she sometimes wore. Dad, she said, the word now flowing naturally. Can I tell you something? Jack knelt to her eye level. Sure, Princess. Callie gently cupped his face in her small hands. I have 2 names, 2 homes, she paused, her blue eyes locked on his. And all of it is love. Jack smiled through tear-filled eyes. After all these years, he hadn't just found his daughter, he'd found himself again.